Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. I call them Black Shirt Sundays. You see, most Sundays my sermon deals with the love and grace of God, the thing we most need to hear. And typically on those days I wear a white clerical shirt. But there are some times when I'm giving what might be called a toe stomper, a sermon that might be hard to hear, but which points out vividly the ways that we have abandoned God and God's way. And often, if I have a sermon like that planned, I'll wear a black clerical. It's gotten so obvious that members of my church look to see what shirt I'm wearing. This week and next week we're looking at the 12 minor prophets and giving very brief overviews of their messages. And if we apply the standard of the clericals I wear to Amos, well, he'd be draped in black from head to toe. Amos gets directly to the point and doesn't pull any punches. Frankly, Amos fascinates me. Not only was he the very first prophet to have his life and work associated with a book all by itself, but he is an outstanding preacher to boot. Not that the people wanted to hear him, however. In Amos's time, the nation of Israel had split into two nations, Judah in the south and Israel in the north. Amos was from Judah in the south, but he went up to Jerusalem in the north to preach. That was bad. Amos was from Judah in the south, but he went up to Israel in the north to preach. And it wasn't well received at all. He was told to go home and preach in his own land, but leave them alone, much like Southerners despised carpetbaggers, or Northerners would dismiss Southern rednecks. But Amos persisted. In this day, Israel was surrounded by threats and enemies, but Amos begins his message by calling out those enemies. He describes how their enemies have done wrong and how God will destroy them. And those who heard Amos were eating that up. Then Amos would move to another closer and more threatening nation and did the same thing. And on it went, the people getting more and more excited about this message from God about their enemies being destroyed. Then Amos applied it to their neighbors in Judah, and the crowd loved it. That's when Amos applied it to them and called them to repent. It was a devastating message, forcing them all to see that they are just as sinful and had abandoned God, just like all the rest. Mic drop. Another time, Amos reports God saying, I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animals I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. This is the equivalent of God saying to us, I hate it when you celebrate Christmas, and I don't like it when you come together for Sunday worship. Why? Because you clutter it up with performing the show. You pay lip service to the words, but your hearts aren't in it at all. You light candles and sing carols, but it's all for you, and it's not true worship, so I'm not going to listen to you anymore. That's a call that echoes from Amos's time right into ours, reminding us that our worship is not about what we receive, but about the praise and glory we give to God. And perhaps the last verse of that is the worst of all. Amos says, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And that sounds fine to us. We want those who do wrong to be brought to justice, don't we? Except Amos is talking about God's justice. And in the Bible, this kind of justice doesn't have a lot to do with crime and punishment the way we think of it. Rather, God's justice is when the poor, the outcast, the oppressed, the orphan and widow have right done to them. And all those who stand in the way, all the rich, all those who exclude, all those who oppress, even by indifference or lack of action, they are the ones who are about to get inundated with the waters of God's judgment. And the problem is, by just about any measure, that's us. I could go on and on. Amos does stuff like this over and over. But there is one more important idea in Amos that I must mention. He is the first prophet that indicates that with all this judgment coming from God, when all those who are evil are wiped away, a remnant shall remain. A remnant of God's people will remain to rebuild, to start again. Even in all this judgment, there is hope, there is renewal, there is life. Maybe that's what that white part of a clerical shirt is, that part right over the voice box. God's message is always, no matter how dark things are, there is hope, there is life. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.